So, Lone Rider here, and I just wanted to briefly mention some bikes that I wish I had. Now, some of these are bikes that I've never owned and probably never will. Some of them are bikes that I actually have owned in the past and parted ways with. Um, Number one, a Fat Chance. Any sort of Fat Chance. I actually had one from the 1980s. I sold it back to the previous owner because I wasn't riding it all that much, largely because I was worried about keeping it in good condition. Although one of the reasons that I didn't ride it as much as I probably should have, um, in my mind, to justify keeping it, was that I'm not as young as I used to be, and the bike had absolutely no suspension. It was from the 1980s. It was completely rigid. No shocks in the front, no shocks in the back. The suspension was basically the tires. That said, it was a beautiful, beautiful bike, extremely well made, very light, and rode awesome. And I do wish, just because of the role that the Fat Chance uh, bikes played in early mountain biking here on the East Coast, um, up through, let's say, the mid '90s. Um, you know, they're just very iconic. I wish I still had one. It would have been a cool thing to have, even if I didn't do any hardcore mountain biking on it. Second, specialized FSR. It would be really cool to have one of these. I got my hands on a enduro version of the FSR at one point. It had the shock located in a different place. It was heavier. It was more of a so-called all mountain bike, and it was a beautiful bike and it rode nice, except for the pedal strike. My Kona dog, um, it's not nearly as aesthetically pleasing as the FSR design, but it rides many times better. Go figure. But if I could find an XC version of the FSR from, let's say, the late '90s, early 2000s, I would definitely snap that up in a heartbeat. Back, in like '98, '99, when I was flipping through pages of Mountain Bike magazine and dreaming about what bike I'd get when I wore out my hardtail. This was the bike that was on my list. I think it was the bike that was on a lot of people's lists. And of course, like a lot of people back then, I was too young and broke to afford it. Now, if I come across one from that era, um, who knows, right? I mean, at this point in time, it would be a used bike. Maybe it would be affordable. Um, so that's number two. Number three, and I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation, so I apologize to you if you're French. Gitane, or as it's you know spelled, Gitane. Um, this is a French bike that existed for a long time, and it might not be as well known as like Peugeot or Motobacan, but to those who know vintage bikes or old school road bikes, is definitely something that most people are aware of. They had some really nice lugged frames, especially in old school Reynolds 531. And I actually had one of these at one point. I had a green one. It was a little too big for me, but it was free, so I didn't argue. And I rode that until the bottom bracket came apart. Now, unfortunately, I didn't know as much about bikes as I do now. I wasn't able to fix the bottom bracket, and so the bike went away. It was traded or discarded. I can't remember which. I wish I still had it. I actually still remember how I found it and brought it home. I was out riding my hardtail mountain bike on the street, just cruising around town. This was back when I must have been like maybe 18, and I rode past a house on the other side of town where somebody was putting out some large items on the curb to throw away, and one of them was this bike, and it was a complete bike except for the wheel set. It didn't have a wheel set, and I think it was missing pedals. But aside from that, everything was there. And then I took it home. I threw some wheels on it. I cleaned it up, and I immediately started upgrading parts and tweaking things. But it was pretty good. It even had the old school Mayfac racer center poles, the ones that used to squeal like a stuck pig. Yeah. They did, in fact, squeal like a stuck pig. I guess I could have done a better job of towing in the brake pads or whatever. But really cool vintage bike with some really cool old school parts on it, and the frame was just beautiful. I wish I had kept it. Um, so, and the next one is a no brainer to anybody who knows vintage cycling. Schwinn Paramount. All right, I've been fortunate enough to handle a couple vintage lugged Schwinn Paramounts, but I've never owned one. Given the price point, I probably never will. But it would be cool if I could come across a vintage one, like from the late '60s, early '70s. That would be absolutely wicked cool. Just they were for the time they were basically as high end as you know mainstream American cycling got. Unless you went to like a flat out custom builder, like some guy who just built a bike just for you. Which brings me to my last thing. I would like to say it would be nice to have a custom bike, except I already have two of them. So maybe this, not that I could normally afford them under normal circumstances, but a friend of mine made one for me, and then I made the other with his help. Um, so maybe this list is superfluous in that sense. Once you have a custom bike, what do you need anything else for? But you can never have enough bikes, and you can never have enough good experiences on bikes. And as a cyclist who's interested in cycling and has been for a long time, I've seen technology change. I've seen bikes change, and there are certain things that yeah, maybe now it's not the latest and greatest, but I'd like to have one because I remember back when that was the thing, or so on and so forth. So like the Fat Chance, yeah, nowadays it's kind of outdated, but it would still be nice to have one, right? And the Schwinn Paramount, well, yeah, it's not going to compete with a um, modern 10 speed campy carbon fiber road bike, but it's not supposed to, right? It's not supposed to. It represents a different time in the history of cycling in America. So, but yeah, there's a handful of these. It would be really cool to have. Some of them I did have. Some of them I wish I had. Lone Rider out.